I've always been fascinated by the relationship that we as documentary filmmakers, or any artists of any kind, have with the amount of people who see our work. How much does it matter whether 100,000 people see our project versus 100 people versus one person? How much do we let audience opinion impact what we create? Well, today on the channel, I'm going to share 3 quotes from artists working outside of our industry that have really changed the way I think about those questions as a documentary filmmaker. Hey everyone, if you're new here, my name is Austin Meyer. I am an Oakland-based documentary filmmaker and National Geographic Explorer. And this past week, I had the opportunity to screen one of my short documentaries at a fundraiser in San Jose with about 200 people in attendance. All right, I'm here in San Jose attending Rancho Compassion's largest fundraiser of the year, where a couple of my short film projects are going to be screening, and yeah, super excited. While I was there, I noticed how good it felt. As someone who primarily shares my work online or on streaming platforms, it's rare that I get the opportunity to be in the same room as the people who are watching my films. And yet, I also know that no one came specifically to that event to see my film. It just happened to be part of the experience while they waited for their dinner. Anyway, it had me reflecting a lot on my relationship to the people and the amount of people who see my work. And maybe you've had similar thoughts. Maybe you've put out a video that you were proud of and hardly anyone watched or responded. Maybe you've seen the view count on a project skyrocket and thought, okay, now what? Well, if you've shared these similar feelings to me, I wanted to share 3 quotes that have helped me as I seek to define my own relationship to the audience, the numbers, and the feedback from those audiences. The first comes from Grammy Award-winning musician Jacob Collier. This is an excerpt from an interview he did on the Colin and Samir show, and he is talking about what it has felt like to rise to musical prominence and reach massive audiences.
The question that I find more interesting when it comes to, success, how successful am I, or how successful am I, is it's not how many people have I reached, it's of the people that I reached. How many of those did I move? Whether that's I reached 20 people, 2 people, 2 million people, 20 million people, 200 million people, whatever that number is, what proportion of those people did I move? And then the question becomes, for any artist, what does it take to move a person? What does that take? And there's only one answer to that, really. And it's to be you, the person who you are, and to tell stories that are true, to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be honest all the time. And this is exactly how I see everything. But you have to find a resonance in you, something that's true and that matters to you. You will find your people. It just happens. It's magnetism.
This quote from Jacob really resonates with me because it takes the emphasis off the total number of people you reach and puts the focus on the proportion of people who are moved by what we create. In that way, it's more focused on the work, the craft, the story, because we can only move people if the stories we create are really good, if they're compelling, if they're honest, have depth to them. So that's where we need to focus. I don't know about you, but I think that in the social media landscape, this can be hard to remember and focus on as a filmmaker. That's because our films have a view count number, not a moved count number. And in a fast-paced, shock value, viral hit ecosystem, it's easy to think about click-through rates and average watch times instead of, is this making a genuine impact on the people watching? Is it moving them emotionally? Jacob's quote also resonates with me based on how I've felt after publishing certain pieces. A perfect example is the comparison between these 2 stories I did just a few months apart from each other in 2020. The first is a 7-minute story I made for Business Insider's news and documentary team about one of the last printing presses in the United States where books are handmade from start to finish. The other is a 13-minute video I made for my own small YouTube channel here about my first solo backpacking trip. The Insider story has over 6 million views across social, while the backpacking video has 48,000. I'm very happy with how both of these stories came out. I think both were successful, but there's no doubt that I consider the backpacking video to be more successful. And that is because when I read through the comments, it's clear that it moved people emotionally more than the printing press film did. People wrote about how the story helped them process a difficult breakup. It prepared them to make a trip of their own, and it helped them connect on a deeper level to natural spaces. I remember reading these comments and being So struck by them. Like, I honestly didn't expect any comments outside of maybe my mom and a few friends. And hi, Mom. I know you're watching this, even though you're not a documentary filmmaker. So thank you for being here every week. For real, I still feel a sense of awe that something I created on a backpacking trip made people feel that way. Even though the printing press video has 10 times the amount of comments, none of them have stayed with me like these comments on the backpacking video did. And for me, that's what feels important. Those testimonials of how people were personally impacted. Those testimonials make a lasting impact on me and hopefully the viewers as well. And that's what I want to remember as I make each documentary and as I make each one of these YouTube videos. Maybe this YouTube video won't emotionally move you, but I'd consider it a big success if it moved even one person to reflect on their own relationship to audiences in a new way.
We show you two films. One of them is on the National Geographic channel on YouTube. It was made by the filmmaker named Austin Meyer, who's here. Austin, can you see stand up?
Now, when we're speaking of audiences and numbers, another area where it gets interesting is working on productions for big streaming platforms. I've worked as a cinematographer on a couple documentaries that were on HBO and Hulu, and not even the directors of those films really get any information about audience reach or impact, let alone me as the cinematographer hearing anything about it. And that makes me think of this quote from the author Lamott from her book Bird by Bird, which is on the craft of writing. In it, she reflects on teaching writing to students where a big problem is that people really want to be published. They kind of want to write, but they really want to get published. Lamott says, quote, "You'll never get to where you want to be that way," I tell them. "There's a door we all want to walk through, and writing can help you find it and open it. Writing can give you what having a baby can give you. It can get you to start paying attention, can help you soften, can wake you up. But publishing won't do any of those things. You'll never get in that way." To sum it up, she goes on to say that almost every single thing you hope publication will do for you is a fantasy, a hologram. It's the eagle on your credit card that only seems to soar. I think this is a great reminder to not worship the idea of getting our films on these big platforms in front of big audiences. Like, just replace the word publication in Lamott's quote with Netflix or Sundance Film Festival. I mean, I used to think about these goals all the time. That was the focus. But then when I've gotten the smallest tastes of those worlds and come away from the experiences feeling no different about myself than I did before those projects, I was reminded that having work on those platforms is not the thing that is going to fill me up. What will fill me up are the stories I work on and how much I care about them, regardless of where they go. Now, of course, this is all balanced with the very real need to make a living and get paid, and working for these platforms can make that more possible. But me personally, I'm trying my best to focus on the filmmaking and less on the platform and the amount of eyeballs. I feel like if I focus on the filmmaking, making great work, then I can trust that the rest will take care of itself as long as I'm patient.
Tracy, we building curriculum focusing on a different resident each month. So
the other pressure that I often feel as a filmmaker is the pressure to reverse engineer what I make based on what the audience wants or what algorithms are rewarding. There's a draw towards what's trending, a pull towards figuring out what exactly the audience wants as a shortcut towards reaching the largest number of people. And that's why I return to this quote from comedian and master storyteller Hasan Minhaj. Here he is talking about the doubts he felt while working on his most recent stand-up special.
In the worst moments, there were these moments where I'm like, man, am I an author writing books in like a digital age? Is this a thing that people don't want or care for anymore? And I remember Prashant told me after we were like in edit till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was like, man, if you wanted to like live your life determining what the audience wanted, you and I should have just been executives, where we're just these kind of creative VCs of like, that seems like a good idea. That seems like it's a good idea. We're on the other side of it because we have something to say. So the tension he's always reminding me of is like, don't just always be a network studio exec to your creative process. Try to keep that channel open and pure. And one of my favorite scenes in Genius, the Kanye doc, is when Pharrell listens to Through the Wire with
that's
Kanye
crazy
and was like,
scene.
man, just keep that channel open of like that thing you really want to say.
Yeah.
And if that thing I want to say, it happens to hit at a moment, like the White House Correspondents' Dinner or Homecoming or whatever, and it happens to match up with what the audience wants, great. If not, just keep your burn low enough that you can still do this for another 40 years.
I love this distinction Hasan makes between artists and executives. Artists think first about what they want to say and how they want to say it, while executives think first about what an audience wants to see and how they want to see it. Now, of course, if we are going to stay in business as artists, we shouldn't completely ignore the market. But what I take from this message is that we can't let the volume of what others want be so loud that it drowns out our own voice and inspiration. Another analogous way I think about this is when I played soccer at Stanford University, my coach used to tell us to never get too high and never get too low. So don't get too high when you're winning, don't get too low when things aren't going well. And being able to emotionally regulate and focus on how you're showing up to the blank slate that is today is how we move forward. Now, I think of it similarly in documentary work. If I have a project that does really well, I don't want to get too high. If a project fails, I don't want to get too low. And that helps me put my focus on creating what I'm inspired to create today without being tossed too violently by the winds of public opinion. So this screening that I had last week was a real joy. There's something special about being in the same room with people watching my documentary work, and I definitely want to continue to have more of those experiences in the future. But writing this video, thinking about it some more, is just helping me reflect on how I make meaning of those opportunities. And I just want to focus on creating work that moves people, not idolizing certain platforms or numbers or awards. And I want to just keep that channel open so that I can really reflect and focus on what is it that I truly want to say as an artist. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, you may also enjoy the one I mentioned earlier in the video about my first solo backpacking trip that seemed to resonate with some people. So right here, click right here to check that out. All right, I will see you next week. Go out and tell some stories.